Last weekend, our children in Youth and Family Ministry, they wrote messages of love and support on paper hearts to be sent to the children at Sandy Hook School in Connecticut. And the Youth and Family Director, Susan, is going to sew them together. Actually, in Newton, the post office has had to open a special office just to receive everything that's being mailed there. And so we're adding to that, because on Wednesday evening at our healing service, we brought the hearts out so that adults can write messages of love to add them to our children's messages. And you'll find them outside in the social hall. You can write a note on one of the paper hearts there. And I want to talk to you about that, because you might get there and not know what to write. And that's probably accurate, because you may be one of those people who is still too disoriented to understand your own response to the world right now. And that's the nature of things. It's the nature of shock and the nature of grief. It has different effects on different people and in different ways. I was reminded of this when I overheard a young woman responding to the prodding of her friends around her, prodding her to say something or do something or know something in the wake of the shooting. And she said very thoughtfully, "Don't mistake my silence for insensitivity or for lack of care or for ignorance, because what happened in the world is on my mind all the time. And I need that time for me to find my way through it and to understand what I understand. And I'm not inclined to put it up for debate right now. I'm too sensitive." And I really took that to heart, and it kind of reminded me of an article by the journalist Andrew Sullivan, who's never at a loss for words, and which he wrote, "I've been finding it hard to find words about Sandy Hook. What words could possibly suffice? And to tell the truth, I just cannot myself begin to have a debate about anything, even though I completely understand the emotions being expressed. I'm just too numb." Sometimes, our founder, Ernest Holmes, wrote, sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do for another is to sit in holy silence. Wisdom, he writes, knows that sometimes there is nothing to say. And when we are fully present to love in the midst of pain, we act as a bridge in consciousness for love to cross over. And that is the gift that transforms life. And sometimes our comfort comes from the children in our lives. I invite you to read some of those hearts. I invite you to speak to the young children, the young adults in your life. I think they are wiser than our culture credits them for being. They know things. And it reminds me of a message that one of our members wrote, in which she relates a conversation with her daughter, and I want to read that to you. She says, "I was talking with my daughter last night about the reasons why people do what they do. I treat her questions with care because she means them. I know she will take what I tell her and sift it around in her head from every angle. In this way, she's a very good honesty practice for me. My first response is to tell her I don't really know, because I don't. And have to leave a lot of room for what can be known that might later change things. So after thinking about it for a moment, I tell her, I believe everything people do is ultimately for love, to return to it, to experience it, and to express it, even or especially when there is mental illness, where the way back to the experience and expression of love is most fractured, even or especially when a person's behavior seems completely at odds with this idea, not to excuse or condone, or not to try to prevent it, but what comes home to me," she writes, "after the shootings, is how important it is that we, inside our own communities, recognize this and take each other personally. I mean, take a personal interest as a community member when one of our fellow members seems to need support. coming from a place of love and care, not judgment. There is a sign outside a fire station on Highway 12, she writes, en route to Sonoma that says something like, only, and then there's a space, your name goes here. Only your name goes here can prevent fires. I think this kind of personal responsibility for the care and keeping of ourselves as a community is an important, urgent attitude shift we need to take as a culture. My daughter and I talked about this for a long time, and we talked about how daunting a community-wide shift in consciousness seems. Then we talked about the influence of a simple smile, a touch, an acknowledgement through direct eye contact, how that makes a difference. Maybe not so hard. A decision, perhaps. So today I make the decision to look people in the eye, to acknowledge people without judgment, to offer support if it seems warranted without pushing it, to let people in my sphere know they are seen and noticed and cared about just as they are, and I will include myself, she writes. I was talking myself to a colleague about this very thing, asking the question, why do people do what they do? And my colleague answered to me, she said, I believe that we as a species, we do the terrible things that we do because we do not understand our unity with all life and with each other, which, she explained to me, is why I am so committed to our teaching, and I see it as my responsibility to bring our awareness of oneness into every act of my life, into every connection, in every email I write, into every conversation I have, so that I raise up the awareness of oneness, and I see this as the way I am called to making a difference in the world. And I really resonated with that. Make me an instrument, me, of your peace, Lord of love. And our teaching is a teaching of oneness, but not of sameness, as we can see in the diversity of responses among us in this world, as it should be. Nobody grieves in the same way, and nor should they be expected to. You might notice the difference and varied grief responses that are taking place in you or maybe around you in other people. And you might notice unusual sensitivity, like the slightest thing can set you off or other people around you. Or you might notice very low tolerance for errors and a strong desire to correct them in yourself or in others around you. Or you might notice that you get angry with people that you typically have a lot of patience and love for. And many more things like that, a sense of being out of step with the world. And I think many people, maybe you, maybe people around you, are finding themselves questioning right now how to respond to the world. How does this idea of oneness and unity play out right now in such a situation? And what am I supposed to think? I was remembering a trip back to South Africa several years ago. I had the chance to visit our Center for Spiritual Living, Johannesburg, there. And I had already been the minister of this center in the United States for many years, so I had many opportunities to see good at work. I had learned to use the philosophy to meet personal and organizational challenges, and I felt really ready to navigate through life's challenges. I felt faith-filled. And then when I got to South Africa, that's when I realized that here, actually, we enjoy, relatively speaking, a tremendous sense of well-being, safety, and freedom. Whereas in South Africa, I watched this metaphysical community living in a world of comparative danger, with a prevailing feeling of a threat. Outside the building during the service were armed guards. And as you drive along the streets, the newspaper on bulletins posted lists the recent murder and rape tolls. And as I sat there watching the members of this community say and sing the same things that we say and sing, we are one, God is all there is, I wondered if I would be able to do the same thing in the midst of so much unsettling danger all around me all the time. The truth is, sometimes I get shaken off my equilibrium when I misplace my keys. Or if I perceive some mistreatment by another person, I can get bent out of shape. Small things can unhinge my equilibrium. I can't imagine what it must be like to come home to something as epically large as the news that my children were shot at school. And I don't know how I would be able to stand in that. In the South African community, I noticed how profound their connection to our teaching was in a real way. And I thought to myself, perhaps it's because their environment is testing them so hard. And I was awed by their courage to stand in the truth in the face of such troubling times. Like I am awed by the young father, Robbie Parker, whose video message about his slain daughter will live in my heart forever. Like I am humbled by the forgiveness role modeling of the Amish community so many recent years ago when the same thing happened. One thing I realize is that everybody is trying to do the same thing. Everybody's just trying to make sense of this situation, make sense of life. The people who believe in oneness, the people who believe in the influence of an independent power for evil, the people who believe in God in one of many forms, the people who believe in no God whatsoever. We're all just trying to navigate through this life, through this world that is sometimes incomprehensible. We're the same in that regard. But our diversity makes it so that there is no one way to peace that will meet everybody's need and calm every troubled soul. One of the many reasons that I love the Bhagavad Gita, from whence the quotes came in our slideshow today, is that it emphasizes that there really isn't one size fits all to spirituality and to traveling through life. The central character, the Prince Arjuna, he is us, trying to make sense of an incomprehensible world, and he's standing at the precipice, on the edge of a tragedy of immense proportion, and he's having a conversation with God, and he wants to know, what is the best way to understand this? What is the fastest way to God consciousness? What am I supposed to know? What am I supposed to do? He is us. And in the conversation, God, in the form of Krishna in this story, says, among other things, that it is in the still mind that we have access to our answers. And he instructs the prince to try and to keep on trying to get to the still mind, to have success in that endeavor, to find his answers. But God doesn't stop there. He acknowledges that there are many different ways to arrive at that sense of connection and equilibrium, and that every one of us is on our own path and must find our own way. Which is, to me, a beautiful reminder for us today, for me, to have patience with each other. It's so important right now to make space for each other, to do or to not do, to understand or to not understand, to act or to not act in our own way, lest we turn upon each other fueled by the shock waves of a tragic violence that we wish to heal from and not further. Have patience with one another. This is no time to fight. Each of us has our own way of responding to shock and our own way of finding healing. For some people, it takes alone time in nature. For other people, they need to be with friends and loved ones more than ever. For others, it's in prayerful stillness. For yet others, it's in the company of people who, like them, are urged to action. And some people will not find their peace until they do something constructive, and others will find it First, by traveling through a period of avoidance and numbness, and yet others will find it. By talking through the confusion of their thoughts and feelings, and yet others will find it by contributing prayer or financially, and yet others will find it by writing a note of love on a paper heart, and you will find it your way. During times of distress, my first inclination is to turn to the Bhagavad Gita for its words, which remind me to ask an important question of myself. And it's this: what kind of person do you want to be throughout all of this? When I look back at this moment from some time in the future, will I be good with how I was? One of the most beautiful sets of verses in the text describe men and women who are servants to love. I don't think it describes an easy approach to life, yet the qualities that are being described remind me of those heroes and role models I mentioned just a moment ago. And it gives me something to aspire to. This is what it says. The one I love is incapable of ill will and returns love for hatred. Living beyond the reach of I and mine, and of pleasure and pain, full of mercy, contented, self-controlled, firm in faith, with all their heart and all their mind given to me, with such a one as this, I am in love. Not agitating the world, nor agitated by it. They stand above the sway of elation, competition, and fear, accepting life, good and bad as it comes. They are wholesome, helpful, detached, and ready to meet the demands I make on them as humble instruments of my work of love. They are dear to me, who serve both friend and foe with equal love, not buoyed up by praise nor cast down by blame, alike in heat and cold, pleasure and pain, free from selfish attachments and self-will, ever full in harmony everywhere, firm in faith. Such as these are dear to me. It gives me something. That article by Andrew Sullivan I mentioned earlier, it goes on like this. Let us focus on the actions of those defending the children, their courage and tenacity in the face of the unspeakable. Among those killed was the school's well-liked principal, Dawn Hochsprung. Town officials said she died while lunging at the gunman in an attempt to overtake him. Let's focus on the actions and heroism of the victims rather than on the easy evil of a soul gone horribly wrong. May God forgive him, but may we also remember that even amid fathomless violence, love stood tall as well. Tomorrow night, we will be celebrating love at our annual candle lighting ceremony that takes place on Christmas Eve every year. And whether or not you consider yourself to be a Christian, you're invited anyway. And we'll be celebrating the kind of love that the man Jesus of Nazareth focused on in his teaching. And we call that love the Christ consciousness. And every night, on the night before his birthday, we light candles as a symbol of reigniting that love in our own hearts and minds. When I was a little boy growing up in the Catholic faith, when we went to church, we would light candles as a symbol of our prayer intention for someone. So that's strong in my tradition. So this year, tomorrow night, when I light that candle and place it in the salt, I will be doing so as a symbol of my prayer for the community in Newtown. And I invite you to come along and do the same, or to light the candle for any reason that you find appropriate for yourself. I want to close with a message from another one of our members who writes, I don't consider myself to be a Christian, but I do believe that the unconditional love that Jesus taught lives within all of us. It is our essential nature, the Christ consciousness. That ability to love as Jesus loved, or as Mother Teresa loved, or as Martin Luther King loved, or as Gandhi loved, that's it. And it's needed now, more than ever. I was convinced that this year that peace and love and hope had vanished, stolen by the violence and tragedy in the world, and especially in Newtown, and rightfully so. But I realized that while, yes, my heart is aching, my soul remains open, that place where we are one. And then he asks us, so please, don't be afraid to love. It's sometimes messy and risky and vulnerable, but it's the only thing that can bring us back from this place we now find ourselves in and return us to where we belong. There you have it. Love, your soul's only assignment. Let us take a moment before we move to the offering to sit in silence and reflect. I invite you to breathe in and let your eyes close.